Hey everybody, Alex from Black Flag HEMA here. I wanted to get back to the idea of Meyer's Dagger real quick. So Meyer, specifically his 1570 treatise, touches a lot on Dagger. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. There's an important piece of Meyer's Dagger that I think a lot of people don't understand when they're trying to do interpretations that really informs the whole concept. For those of you unfamiliar with Meyer's Dagger section, A, go read it, it's fantastic. B, so what I'm holding in my hand right now is a, let's call it a 17th century-ish parrying dagger. This is my parrying dagger that I use with my rapier. Obviously, it's got a blunt on it, as we can see. It is long. It is designed to be held in an orthodox grip, in a forward grip, potentially even a little bit with the flat rolled towards our thumb. And this design gives us our leverage in parrying. It lets us pick up our angles, and it lets us bind and trap in the quillions, right? So what Meyer's treaty mostly includes is the rondelle. He does say that it can be used with a variety of types of daggers or edged weapons, but primarily it is designed around the rondelle. There's a couple of reasons for this, in my opinion. Even though the rondelle was not necessarily being carried a whole lot in the Holy Roman Empire during Meyer's time, the rondelle was primarily, and for the record, this is a cold steel training rondelle. They do not have a little ball on the end like this. This is actually modeled after what we could probably assume are wooden rondelles in the Meyer treatise, or Meyer's manual. But the rondelle, this rondelle is modeled after one that has a triangular cross section, right? We can see it is not flat. It is not edged at all. It is effectively, there's no quillions, there's no guard, there's no hand protection. It is an ice pick. And the rondelle was a fantastic tool for fighting in armor. It was fantastic for getting into and under joints and getting around and up under a gorget into the headspace of the helmet up through here. It's fantastic for wrestling with. It really is like an extension when you're grappling with it and trapping and doing these kinds of motions. I think it's really important for us to understand that this does come from a primarily armored context, and that what Meyer is doing is a recreation of primarily those armored techniques. And I say that for a number of reasons. Number one, if you have ever done any dagger sparring of any kind, or you've done any modern martial arts that include knife or dagger, I'm going to put these down real quick. But for instance, if we're talking about maybe something a little bit shorter, it turns into frequently where we will be doing this at each other a lot and trying to get these little, like, scary. Yes, absolutely, it absolutely does. 90% of your dagger fighting is that, and there's not really a good reason that it shouldn't be. 90% of your dagger fighting is going to be that because that's the low-hanging fruit. If you are in a knife fight, quote unquote, and we'll get to that in a second. If you are in a knife fight, you are trying to cut and attack and make these motions and do these things as quick as you can while not dying. That's actually really difficult. So by the way, this is the Purple Heart Marazzo dagger trainer. And I've got another one behind me that we actually use, which is the Purple Heart Penty style synthetic dagger. These are a little bit safer. Number one, and I think probably the biggest thing that I find important, is that a lot of Meyer's dagger is these kind of complicated locking and grappling maneuvers. Well, with a rondelle, without an edge on it, these make a lot of sense. Where we can, I'm going to be my own bad guy for a second here. The dagger is coming in. We can parry it and come around and trap and then finish with our stab. We want to get control of the weapon hand, etc. And all of that, when you start working through the plays, it starts to seem almost suicidal or dangerous, which is obviously not what a martial arts teacher wants to teach his students. So we started really thinking about the context and where the dagger work in Meyer came from and kind of what was it being used for, and a couple of things played out. Number one, any of you who've dagger fenced, you've noticed, I'm sure, like I was saying before, these knife fights, they turn into a lot of, here's this cut, and here's these little things, and these little things we're doing, and even doing it reverse script, I'm looking for these little low-hanging fruit kind of opportunities. And that's fantastic. That's obviously that's going to be most of your fight, right? Most of a boxing match is jabs. That's going to be 90% of the fight. The other 10% is when your two arms meet. It's, we're here, what do I do with it? We've both stepped into measure. I've caught his arm, I'm underneath it. What do I do with it? That's a lot of what's in Meyer's Dagger section, let's call it, the portion of his book that is the Dagger. But what's really, really critical to understand is that my opinion is that Meyer's Dagger is not self-defense. And the reason I say that is because Meyer's Dagger explicitly relies on two people coming into contact with each other, knives out, agreed that they're going to fight, and I'll get to the knives out part in a second. Agreed that they're going to fight, and then they would like to harm each other, but not as much as they would like to prevent themselves from being harmed. And that's really, really critical distinction. Any of you who are familiar with modern knife tactics or knife defense tactics, or how police officers or modern military are trained against knife attacks, it's really, really, really imperative. For instance, police officers are often taught, if you're being attacked with a knife, create distance immediately and draw. Or draw taser, etc. And the reason for that is because knife attacks are lethal, and people that decide they want to attack you with a knife often do not have a very high regard for their own self-preservation, which makes them extremely dangerous. There's some fantastic literature that's been published recently that by some folks in HEMA that talks about how easy it is to double with a fencer, to both of you touch each other at the same time, if that is your goal. If I am trying to hit you with no regard for my own safety at all, I'm going to. 9 times out of 10, it is almost impossible to prevent. What prevents that from occurring is a desire to not die, right? A desire to not get stabbed. That's one thing. Number 2, I think that Meyer does include several plays that are against, right? You're unarmed and it's grabbing the dagger and it's dropping it to here and then it's stripping the dagger out of the hand and doing these things. Those are valid in a self-defense scenario, but they're going to be in even lower percentage use. They're going to be in like maybe the 1% of knife attack scenarios where somebody goes to attack you with a knife, you're unarmed, you're aware that it's coming. Somebody goes to attack you with a knife or a dagger in this context, in the medieval context, right? Somebody goes to attack you with a dagger and you are not only aware of it, but you have time to react. Somebody goes to attack you with a dagger and you're facing them already. And they only attack once. They don't just keep, right? In law enforcement, they refer to it as the sewing machine, right? Is just this over and over again. That's very, very difficult to attack, to defend against a truly non-cooperative opponent in that setting. So it really, again, it's low margin use. Now, I am not implying that Meyer's Dagger section is like Grandmaster Ninja bullshit. I don't think so at all. I think that Meyer's Dagger plays work fantastically. I just think we have to contextualize them with, this is a low usage, not even a low usage, but a potentially low usage technique in a style of martial art that is very high usage in little flowing and little tapping and little cutting, right? And if you're familiar with Filipino martial arts and how the knife is used there's a lot of flowing through and working around and getting multiple cuts and doing these things. There's not as much of a focus on get in close, bind, grapple, one-shot kill, which there is in Meyer. We see that a lot in Meyer. And I think that that's a perfectly valid martial technique. I train it, I teach it at my club. And I think that it's valuable stuff to include in the curriculum. I think it actually informs a lot of Meyer's sword curriculum that is lacking a little bit, specifically like Ring and Schwert, where wrestling with the sword is a little bit lacking compared to other sources or compared to even some of the Italian sources. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity to learn what Meyer was doing and who he was teaching through the Dagger system explicitly. His Dagger system is designed for two people who have agreed to cause each other harm, but not more than they would like to not be harmed. Their primary focus is on defending themselves. And that's very apparent in how both participants in the plays act. And I think it's very apparent in the fact that the people who are executing these plays and doing these things, they're trapping and they're disarming and they're doing these things with the rondelle, right? And I think it's very apparent in the fact that we're talking about a book from the 1570 of unarmored dagger fighting that's using a rondelle. That's almost, it's not quite anachronistic, it's almost anachronistic that he's using the rondelle and teaching the rondelle, but we could consider it more like classical fencing in terms of modern sport fencing, right? What he's doing is he's reviving or attempting to prevent from going extinct the chivalric arts of medieval Germany, Holy Roman Empire, right? German-speaking areas. And I think that's a fantastic endeavor. It's what we're trying to do today, certainly. And I think that, albeit potentially less successfully, but I think that the system is valid. I think it's a fantastic system. I think that there's a lot to be learned from doing Meyer's Dagger. I think that a lot of his plays are very interesting, and I think a lot of them work in the percentage of time that the availability to use them effectively appears in an actual combative situation with a resisting opponent. So that's all I wanted to touch on. I just wanted to touch a little bit on Meyer's Dagger and get into a little bit of why I don't think it's self-defense. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please remember to like and subscribe, and hopefully I will see you next time. Thanks a lot.